and the Texas beer tasting thing. Before we get into this section, I do want to thank all the people who've been putting in a lot of time, a lot of work, such as Mrs. Pat Burzio over here. So, thank you for everything that you've done. You gonna go smack him?
Smack him.
Oh, and Bill Burns for all his technical support as well. Ron Jackson for managing the live stream. And big help earlier today in the registration area, Mr. Tom Becker. You got all your names in the box for figuring out who's going to be our guest of honor.
They were not all Bill.
Like my story.
All right. So let's get into this. And fortunately, we have had probably what some people are now calling the year of the jackpot 3 in 2020. We have lost some very key people in our community. And even since last year's Corflu, remembering Andy Schechter, for one, last November, I believe it was, correct? For Andy. And but the 3 that have really hurt the most, probably within the last couple of months, they were all supposed to have been here, except for the last one. But we'll just start with the first. This was originally going to be just a memorial artwork and talk about Mr. Steve Stiles, who has been just a godsend to anyone who produces a science fiction fandom and fanzines. His work is just insane. And this is just a little scroll through. I'm gonna have to put this on. Bill, where's that? I thought we took the rapid advance off. Oops.
Oh, that is fast.
That is way too fast. Oops.
He looks just like his cartoon.
Kind of a fun effect, though.
Transition.
Turn yourself back up.
How do you turn that on?
Back to slide.
Back to slide one.
Thank you, Microsoft, for all this work.
Yeah, hope Microsoft didn't do an update,
All right. Let's see if this does it.
Was that you?
That was me.
Oh, good, okay.
Okay.
That wasn't you, that was you, no. No.
It's still.
I'll keep pushing it back if it goes forward.
Oh, this is-
Slideshow.
Get done.
Put it on manual. Take it off automatic.
That's what he's doing.
Well, it's still set automatic.
Man, that was going, my presentation's done.
It still says automatic.
What's it say?
I'm telling you.
Right.
Manual. Upper right,
Yeah,
change
yeah,
it to manual.
No, that's just the video output.
Oh, well, there must be a manual advance.
Yeah, well, there is, but it's
Transition.
This is a-
Five times real fast. What about 25 minutes per slide?
Yeah, that might help.
Manual.
Oh, advanced slides manually, that's it.
I'm gonna wait a couple of seconds, make sure that, because it was starting. All right. 4, 3, 2, 1. It's not moving. Okay.
Yeah.
Yay. Thank you, sir. See, we can't work these things without Mr. Burns. This is why he's the Ghost of Honor this year. All right. So as soon as Mr. Jackson is ready, when he's doing that, I've been producing fanzines since 1976, and having the work of Steve's in the fanzines has always been just one of my favorite things, especially when you just send things to me out of the blue. Hey, could you use this? I said, sure. I mean, it's Steve Styles. And Stephen hasn't done that for me yet. So, Dan, get on that if you're watching this. But I love this. We're just going to look at the stuff that he did, but man, and if anybody ever wants to chime in and talk about what he's done for yours, these are just for all of us in general. This is a memorial session for all three of these gentlemen that we have recently lost. So, but I've always loved Steve's style. And that is not a deliberate pun. I just love his artwork. He's just massively creative and innovative with his work. I'm a musician, as you'll unfortunately find out later tonight.
Isn't that Trump?
Yeah, that is Trump. That was on the cover of my Shit Given, which was a rant anthology produced before the election of 2016. And that was on the front cover.
There you go.
But, and being a musician, I love the one that he did on the left.
The hands are too big.
And Robert Lichtman just found pictures of his trap door from my collection. Some of the stuff that Styles would do, you could just tell some of his influences, like in EC Comics, and just kind of the weird way his mind would operate.
H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah. I love the one on the left, just because he's walking up through a door and everything, like, what the heck is going on here?
The one on the right could be Gay and Wilson.
Could be. Mm-hmm. Who was one of his influences? I think we could see that. We just lost Gay and Wilson last year too, didn't we? Come to think of it. Yeah. And of course, his sense, like I said, his sense of humor was just fantastic. And no matter what, and his style. Someone refresh my memory. He worked for EC Comics, or just influenced by it, or which comic outfit was he doing work for?
Styles?
He worked for British Marvel.
British Marvel, that's it. So I don't remember how long he worked for them. Anybody remember?
Steve's professional experience was not anywhere, was very hit or miss. And it was a great frustration to him that he never really broke through and began to do regular comics or anything like that. He did art and pinch hit in a number of comics over the year. I know that he drew some panels for a Batman once. He also was extremely adept at copying styles of Walt Kelly and Al Capp. He did a whole series of Lil Abner revival strips that were actually really brilliantly done and had the same kind of really acerbic, bitter political quality that Al Capp used to put into his stuff. And that's the thing that I think about when I think about Steve, is this magnificent bitterness.
That's a great word. Great phrase. I like that. Magnificent bitterness.
That needs to be on his too.
The whole thing with Al Capp, he was supposed to revive Lil Abner. It was going to be in daily newspapers and everything. And then I think it fell through because Al Capp's wife or some relative objected in some way that, and Steve's luck was shit most of the time.
If you read Ted White's memorial about Steve, Ted knew Steve for over 60 years. And wonderful write-up that Ted sent to me. And then one from Michael Dobson sent along his eulogy that he did early this year at Steve's funeral. And beautiful, and they talked about Steve's work and things that he did over the years and all the things that kept happening to him. Just phenomenal. I mean, and he came out in his work. If you read the thing about him that Michael Dobson wrote, his 11th grade art teacher committed suicide by jumping out of a classroom window in full view of the class.
All right.
I briefly taught high school, I can relate.
Hopefully not holding a piece of Steve Stiles artwork when he
No,
did it.
for most of us, a single window jumping episode would be enough for a lifetime, but not Steve. A few years later, as Steve was walking down the street, another suicide landed plop just behind him. For most people, defenestration is an answer to a trivia question. For Steve, it's a way of life. And in the program book here, Michael sent along a bunch of artwork that he did. And here's a picture from that 11th grade. He goes, my 11th grade art teacher jumped to his death in full view of the class, and here's a little cartoon of that. He took these events and he put them in his art, his cartoons. And he probably did it the best of anybody I've ever seen, at least in my short life. But phenomenal. So how we could take events like that and make them funny. Gallows humor in a way, visual gallows humor.
Well, like this one.
Yeah.
We also had the funniest cover I've ever seen for a TAF report that came out 30 years later or something like that. But
That one on the right is super.
1968, he was the TAF winner.
Get closer to it.
And he
That's right, he was the TAF, in 1968, he was the TAF.
1968, he was the TAF winner. And apparently, at some point in the convention, Eric Bedcliffe's daughter saw him with his full beard and long hair. I think Simon said, "It's Jesus!" And he used this as the cover for his TAF report.
And Sandra, you were talking about the one on the right there?
Yeah, it's a typical Styles episode. I don't know whether people can actually see it, but it's worth if you can't see it. It's basically one day at school, someone wrote on the blackboard, "Mrs. Brooks is a big black baboon," and Steve Styles got up and started saying, "You shouldn't do that. That's really racist and really horrible." And then Mrs. Brooks came in and said, "Who put that on the blackboard?" And the rest of the class all said, "Styles did."
Like that.
That was Steve.
That was Steve.
That was Steve's look.
They just blame him.
That's what Mike pointed out in his eulogy. Steve had the worst look of anybody he's ever known in his life. And we get stuff like this as a result. It's some other things. I love the one in the middle. I mean, that is so him. And of course, his little filler arts, some of the little jokes and these little, and if you look closely, you see all sorts of things going on in his work. I mean, the top right one, spaceman walks onto a planet, and at first glance you sit there and you go, what the heck is going on here? But there is a joke there.
They all have smartphones and they're taking pictures.
Uh-huh.
There you go.
That's what people do.
Yep. And for further work, look at the detail. It's phenomenal stuff. And he used to complain about never getting a Hugo, so he gave himself one. And he sent this to me. I could use it in my fanzine a few years back. And so he figured this is about the only way he'd ever get a Hugo for best fanzine, for best fan artist, I should say. And then when he finally got one, this was his reaction. And I just love the look on his face.
A few years before that, he'd published there was a strip called Screwball Slumber, which he had in one of his portfolios at Old Kemp's fanzine EI. And this was so apposite that when he died, I asked by Michael Dobson if I could reprint it. So it's on the back cover of Inca 17. It's a wonderful fantasy about what trouble he might get into when he eventually wins a Hugo Award and has to give an acceptance speech. I won't spoil it, just read it.
Okay,
I've got a few copies of it.
that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, but I just adore that picture.
Yeah.
So before we move on, anybody else have any other styles, comments or stories? Yes, sir.
All right.
Mr. Hooper.
Some of you will have heard this story everybody who was at last year's convention heard this story already. But it's the happiest Steve Stiles story I know, and I'm going to tell it again. And those who weren't there, I want you to hear it. a year ago, Carrie and I and Rob Jackson and Sandra and Nigel, were you with us? Who all went to the trip who all went to Steve and Elaine's house with us? Rob?
I was there.
Yeah.
I was there, yeah.
Another British man? Well, maybe it'll come to me, but it doesn't really matter. But we all met at Steve and Elaine's house on Lucerne Road in Randallstown. And we sat around and looked at some of Steve's art and things. And he took me down into his workshop and showed Rob and I all his stuff and the board where he did all of his work and stuff, and that was fun. And then he took us down, they took us down to the Inner Harbor in Baltimore, and we went to visit the Museum of Outsider Art, I think. I can't remember what the actual name of the place was, but it basically was, some art of a transgressive nature. And it was one of his favorite museums, just simply because of the premise. And we had a lot of fun going through the museum. And then as we began to walk back, to go back to where we were going to pick up the ride home, we all got strung out because Steve had half of his lung removed the previous year. And so as we walked along, he would stop about every 4 or 5 steps and go, "Oh boy, oh boy." And so I decided to hang out with him. Actually, I took off first and walked a long distance by myself, and then I waited for someone to show up again, and then Steve came up, and I said, "Okay, I'll wait with you." And we were in a group by ourselves, and we were separated from everyone else. And Steve had on some kind of a shirt that was connected to a convention of some kind. I have no recollection of what it was now. But we had something on that indicated that we were fans. And as we were standing at the street corner, waiting to cross the street and go to the train station, a young African-American woman came up to Steve and said, "Oh, are you involved with the science fiction convention? Is there a convention happening around?" And we said, "Oh, yes, well, yeah, a very small convention." She said, "Oh, well, I really enjoy them. You know, I went to the last one here in Baltimore, and I've been to a number of other big conventions on the East Coast, and I think it's a lot of fun." And Steve says, "I'm a Hugo winner!" And bless her heart, she said, "Oh, how wonderful! Oh, how remarkable! How lovely to meet you!" And I said under my breath, "I've lost 14 times."
We never mentioned those.
Anyway, Steve and the young lady had a great conversation for about 3 minutes, and he told her about the con, but we didn't see her again. But I'm just so incredibly grateful that we got to have that experience, and Steve got to have that little bit of feedback from just a random fan on the street.
That's cool.
Very nice.
The other two were there with Grant Canfield and Steve Jeffrey.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what Steve.
Yeah, that's
Man, we used to have a fake whiskey.
That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that, Andy. Yes, ma'am.
One thing that might also be worth mentioning, of course, everyone knows what a great artist Steve was, but he could write as well.
Yes.
Damn, the man could write. And if anyone here is going to be reading Gene Lamal's staff report of the 1987 World Con, well, over there on that table is an issue of BS Fan, the Baltimore fanzine, with Steve Styles' report on the 1987 World Con. So if you want to compare the two, get your bins in.
Well, there's also one of his most brilliant things he ever wrote. That I think it's one of the best fanzine articles of all time. Period. I read. It's my first orgy.
Yes.
Yes, where everybody gets domain placed. This is what would happen with Steve if something would go wrong almost automatically. It's brilliant.
Bishop Bill Burns.
Yeah, I've hosted Steve's website on my server for many years, and I'll be renewing the domain name and maintaining that. And it's stevestyles.com, and it has his writing, artwork, all done by Steve himself, not updated all that recent, but a lot of very good material on there. stevestyles.com will get you right there.
Yeah.
My firstology, also contained in Fanthology 1992, also on this table for sale.
The museum, Jerry reminds us it's the American Museum of Visionary Arts.
Right.
Lovely museum, actually.
Gene.
Steve had a very antagonistic relationship to technology. Last summer, apparently, his copy of Photoshop turned off. I think he had an illegal copy of it, and he was frantic because
No, he didn't. It was legal. I gave it to him.
okay, well.
No, it was legal.
Okay, whenever I said I have a fairly recent version of Creative Suite, the whole thing, with Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign and Acrobat, and I'd be glad to give that to you. And I could give you the key code, and you'll be able to sign in and be able to use it. And he was frantic because he was in the middle of a job that required that he scan and save the files electronically. So I sent it to him, and he said, "Oh no, you have to install this one with a CD, and I don't have a CD driver. I won't be able to use it." And I said, "Well, couldn't you?" I ended up sending him our piece of equipment. I had a separate CD driver, and I said, "I don't use it hardly at all anymore," and I wrapped it up in a package and sent it to him. And I got an email from him a little bit later saying, "It doesn't work, it's broken." And so we went through it, just plug it in, it should appear on your desktop. No, it doesn't work. And now the copy of the CD is locked inside it, and I can't get it out, and I'm doomed. And everyone, technology hates me. I'm going to quit it forever. And he sent it all back. Scott and I plugged it into his computer.
That's great.
So I don't know what happened with that, but it was a very traumatic couple of weeks.
Sure sounds like it. Good.
Teaching him to use PayPal was fun too.
We could probably go on all night without Steve, couldn't we? Anybody else? Tom.
Yeah, so Spike and I had a really fun experience at the Corflu in Newcastle, going over to Sunderland to meet Brian Talbot, and Brian Talbot was thrilled to meet Steve. It's like, oh, I know your work, and so that was neat.
It's cool to be appreciated like that.
Another really fine artist that you should check out, Brian Talbot.
I shall.
And a lovely guy.
Shall. Thank you.
And Michael Dobson is working on finishing up the collection of hypercomics.
Yes, I believe that was mentioned in Michael Dobson's contribution.
He said it's actually ready now.
So hopefully it will be available soon.
Real soon now.
We should all buy it.
Well, another person that we lost recently took a lot of us by shock. Oh, sorry. To finish up with pictures of Steve, I love the one from Banana Wings from just a couple of months ago. Last year, I love that. Arpana, did you ever stare up at the stars and wonder if tailless, two-eyed biped mammals may be staring back at you? And Barkner goes, "Are you out of your fucking mind?" I love that. And I never knew that he did stuff with Bill Rossler until I saw this one.
Well, everyone did stuff with Rossler, though, didn't they?
I love that.
We also did quite a few cartoons collaborating with Alexis Gilliland.
I've seen those, yes. All right, and then we lost Frank Lunny, and I had trouble finding some pictures. I wound up going to Gary Mattingly's Flickr account.
Gary who?
Yeah, you know him.
Gary Mattingly?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
I hadn't seen him in a billion years.
Well, he's here.
He's here.
In the back.
Oh, is that the con?
But thanks to Gary, I found some good pictures of Mr. Lenny.
Now you're singing, you can sit down.
I thought he was dead.
Now you're good for the rest of the weekend, right?
No, he was wine tasting.
But I have a couple of copies of Via Bohema, his Hugo nominated fancy. That he did. I love this picture of him. Was this at a Corflu in 2013?
It looks like
Looks like it.
Which was where?
2013.
That would have been in,
That would be in Portland. If the date is correct, that would be Portland. Portland.
This was the Boom Chicka Wawa.
Yeah.
Corflu number
Yeah.
30, triple
Right,
X.
he's ordering pork belly rice at the Chinese place.
it looks
Yeah.
like, it looks more Ethiopian. Habesha?
Yeah, that
I can assure you, he had the pork belly rice. So of course,
You were,
Did he used to run a restaurant?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's already with his restaurant.
That must have been hard knowing young people.
it looks like he's being very specific about what he wants to order here.
which is everything.
Frank was obsessive about food. And it was very, I mean, he complained that potatoes were too starchy.
Potatoes are too starchy?
Yes.
Okay.
But, you know, he owned a restaurant, that was, or, you know,
And found this one of, and I forget, who's the other person with Frank here?
Jake
Just
Kennedy.
Jake Kennedy.
Thank you. In another cover of Via Bohema.
I believe he was a teenager when he was starting out with Via Bohemia.
Yeah.
But I can't get over are the people who were contributors. A youngster, a teenager by the name of Gene Klein, who changed his last name to Simmons.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't believe, that blows me away. And some other people who were
Some
just.
non-editing named Kuntz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little Uncle Anthony.
Little dumb fellow by the name of Dean Koontz. Yeah.
And Piers Anthony.
And Piers
He
Anthony.
denies everything now.
And there's a reason why this was nominated for a Hugo or for Best Fantasy. It lost out to Dick Geist, Science Fiction Review.
Yeah, only out of habit.
Yeah.
At that time.
Do you know what year he was nominated?
1970, I believe it was. If I remember correctly, I can look that up again, but I believe it was 1970. But, and some other pictures of him.
I think so, yes.
And I think the one on the bottom left was taken at Corflu Silver up in Vegas.
No, that's Portland.
That's Portland again.
That's
Yeah, I think that's
the
another
back where
corporate
we're
reference.
Portland, the big windows, triple X.
Yeah, it might be one of the
In
Seattle
fact,
ones.
it's the same background as the earlier restaurant shop. That's the same curtain.
But there was no date on this one, Gary, when I got this from your site. Do you remember when this might have been taken? About 2012, maybe 12 or 13. So it could be from that same restaurant that from the other picture here.
George, it must be 2012.
Okay.
Yeah.
George Katz, yes.
Yeah. Choice one.
Andy, do you remember?
Is that only in
And Hope.
Oh, no, if Arnie and Joyce in there, that has to be Las Vegas.
That must be Las
No,
Vegas. That would be the Henderson one, Glitter.
The last Portland they attended outside
Did
of
it,
Las
like
Vegas
glitter,
was,
glitter.
Glitter, yeah.
the Port Flash in 2000.
Yeah.
And there he is again with food.
He was always fun to go out to eat with.
Yes.
Really?
King of the stars.
If you like food.
Yeah, you have to have kimchi.
And finally, Via Bohema number 3.
Here they are, Cliff Richard.
Is that Jack Gordon on the left? There's Michael Dobson on the right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who is on the left.
He was much younger then.
Frank did another excellent fanzine called Syndrome.
That was the successor to Via Bohema, yeah.
Yeah, he called it Via Bohema because he had too many subscriptions.
So I had trouble. So I had more stuff because it started off as a Steve Styles art thing, and then 2 other key people that we've known for a long time. I met Frank at Corflu Choir, and lovely gent, had a lot of fun. Especially I went to dinner with him, and it was like, he could pack it away. I've never seen anybody like that before. And that was the weekend that I was sharing a room with Chris Garcia, the first and only time I've ever done that.
That's so smart.
Anyway, and
Yeah, there you go.
there it is, 1970. And if you look at the nominations for that year's awards for Fanzine Yuga, it was quite the crew, quite the grouping. I forget who some of the other ones are, but to be in that tier.
And he would only have been, how old was he, 1974, 52, so it's.
18.
Yeah.
18 years old when this happened.
Mind you, he lied about his age.
Really?
Yes. At Corflu Sunsplash in Panama City Beach, Florida, Frank and I were standing waist deep in the ocean. And I was saying something about, oh, I'm beginning to feel rather old, or something like that. And this was, of course, 1999. And Frank said something along the lines of, oh, well, yes, I'm feeling terribly old too. I'll be 65 next year.
When he was 47.
When he was, in fact, 47. I believed him completely and went around for 5 years thinking he was 65 years old and told this to Dan Steffen, who peed himself.
He's a silent.
I think Frank was also a very talented baseball player when he was a kid.
I remember talking baseball with him at Corflu Choir.
I don't know if any, I'm not sure. The two people I know in fandom who were really good ball players were Frank and the late Lee Pelton.
Good friend of mine.
Published a Pride of Heat.
Yep.
And also was a room editor for a while.
Yes.
He was a great pitcher when he was a kid. Frank was a third baseman and a shortstop, apparently, and a really good fielder and a pretty strong hitter as well. And it was one of the things that he contemplated doing, but he fell into fandom and discovered girls and drugs, and baseball.
We corrupted him.
Went away.
Yeah, I played Little League Baseball with Lee Pelton's younger brother, Keith Pelton.
Oh.
So, my brother went to school, my brother knew Lee and Keith from school, so. Yeah. What are the
I think
connections?
very few people are aware of his athletic past, and he always tried to stay in really good shape. He was a very avid workout aficionado, and I think a lot of people thought he was probably 10 years younger than he was.
Yeah.
10 years older.
It's very tough to keep up with him walking around in Austin.
Yep.
And then, Earl. And
Died for our sins.
Yeah.
One or two sins of his own, possibly.
picture on the right taken by Mr. Burns over here at Corflu Choir. And that's him with his son Terry, I do believe.
Terry would like to get zines. I have his address if anybody would like to write it.
So, and I just had to put a picture of this one up. Who Killed Science Fiction? One of the best fanzine in 1961, I believe it was. And what a collection of people. He asked something like, how many people for contributions? 100 and some writers and fans to about science fiction, and a monstrous issue. And look at this, if you look at the signature down there, very best to my, for a great job well done, Ed Emsch. And a picture from a picture I took at Corflu Choir of that table.
Yes, it is, yeah.
It's Peter Weston
Very similar pictures of that table.
Harry Bell.
and Harry Bell.
Harry Bell.
And looks like Andy's looking for a place to sit.
You've got Graham Charlotte and Mike Moorcock at that table as
Very
well.
angry at us all for leaving the bar. So
Jerry Kaufman in the
Yeah,
background.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Because you've got Graham Charlotte and Michael Moorcock at that table too.
Right. And I think Errol is actually talking with Mike Moorcock. He's turning over to his left. I think that's Michael Moorcock between Graham and Earl,
That's correct.
if I remember correctly.
Yeah. But there's some versions of that in Inca too.
So, and I did not know this about Earl. Picture on the left from the file 770 posted this thing last week. I did not know that could have been that he was into masquerades in costume. Did not know this. But I do have a copy of the proceedings of TriCon 3 that he chaired at World Convention in Chicago. And I believe that's John Stopa
Must be,
yeah,
on that cover picture there.
yeah.
I mean, he recorded so many panels and speeches, and then Labor of Love did a transcription of it and put it in a book. There's a copy of this book in the Texas A&M library, not the Cushing Special Collection, in the circulating library at Evans Library in A&M. So, which blew me away when I saw that in there.
Earl Kemp met Richard Shaver.
Wow.
If any of you met Earl Kemp, you were 1 degree of separation away from Richard Shaver.
Oh, yeah, so did Walt Willis.
And from Corflu Choir,
In Austin, yeah.
picture that I took. That's a great picture. Future Corflu guest of honor on the left. By the way, A&M Library, the Cushing Library, has all the papers, all the manuscripts and of Michael Moorcock. And I believe, Howard, you've got your documents are in the library as well, I believe.
George Martin.
And George Martin. And Andre Norton's. Chad Oliver, like a big collection of Chad Oliver's stuff. But one of the things that the Cushing Library has done, which is why I'm so bummed that we couldn't get over there, is their collection of science fiction manuscripts and papers and books and of Texas writers and Texas fandom. So fascinating stuff. And like that picture on the left. And Earl winning the Lifetime Achievement Award. What year was that?
2012. I think.
2012.
2012?
Yeah.
The insoluble deadlock resulted in both Earl and Shelby Vick getting Lifetime Achievement.
That's a tough choice.
They were both very happy.
Oh, yeah.
And probably my all-time favorite picture of Earl. Wasn't it Corflu Choir where we came up with the Corflu salute, and that's what Earl is giving Nick Ferry there.
Yeah, Murray came up with it first, but yeah, I think that was.
Was that at Corflu Choir we came up with that?
Yes. That was during the Fan Awards.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. At Corflu Choir.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And so I guess the year after.
Yes, Earl saluted Nick.
Mm-hmm. I had to finish with that picture. And I have a very interesting Earl Kemp story just because it comes from Corflu Choir. Earl is flying into the Austin airport on that Friday afternoon. And, well, Pat Hughes was involved with this. And I was in the convention suite. It was mid-Friday afternoon, and I'm just sitting there talking and with folks and stuff, and Hope Eaglewoods is there, and Ted White and stuff. And at one point, well, Pat comes up to me and says, "Hey, can you keep an eye on the con suite? I got to go pick up Earl Kemp at the airport." And I go, "It won't take me long. It's very close, and I'll be back very shortly, like within an hour." Well, about hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes later, Ted and I are digging through the bathtub filled with soft drinks and beers and stuff, and the phone rings in the con suite. And I look at Ted and go, should I answer that? And he goes, I guess. So I pick up the phone, and it's Pat calling from the airport. And first question out of her mouth, is Earl there? No, I haven't seen it. Hang on, let me check around. And so I go around, and I just in the con suite there. Has anybody seen Earl Kemp? Is he here? Has anybody seen? And there's, no, not here, not at all. Okay, so I come back into the phone. I go, get back in. No, he's not here, Pat. Well, I've been going up and down the concourse for the last 25 minutes. I can't find him anywhere. Now the Austin airport is not that big, right?
Oh, this was this was the new one. This was
This-
Bergstrom.
Oh,
This is, yeah. Yeah, this was the new one, which was bigger.
it was bigger, but she still, you knew where his gate was. She went straight to it, and she could not find him. Well, that's why I told her, well, if he shows up, I'll let you know. And hung up the phone, and about 15 minutes later, in walked Earl Kemp to the consulate. And I said, what are you doing here? Pat's over at the airport looking for you. She's going frantic. She can't find you. And he's standing there like, as he does with that lovely little smile of his, I'm like, how'd he get here? And he goes, I took the bus. But she was supposed to pick, I took the bus. And so I picked up my phone, called Pat, and I said, Earl's here. Guess who just walked in? Earl just walked in. And there was like a 5-second pause, and then Pat said, I'm going to kill him.
But you did.
Yes, Bill.
But e-fanzines, Earl got back into fandom in the early 2000s.
Yes.
And mainly through the email list. And he said, I think I'll do a fanzine. Can you host it for me? I said, yeah, sure. So can you help me produce it also? And I said, I want it to be an HTML, just a web page fanzine. And it was called EI, Earl's Ego, basically, EI. And so he started writing his fanzine. He sent me the first issue, and I put it up. And then a couple of months later, he sent me another issue, and I put that up. And he ended up with 60 issues, not missing a single one from his schedule. He got all sorts of people to write. It's basically his memoirs from the 50s and 60s in science fiction, the sleaze books that he worked with, being prosecuted for publishing the illustrated guide to the President's Commission on Pornography report. It's a very dull report, so Ian Willingham did the illustrated edition. And we ended up with, by the time he finished, there were 4,000 pages of basically his memoirs. And at one point I said, no, did all this really happen? So I'm not sure anymore, but it's an amazing insight into the history of the field, and there are all sorts of contributors. He just rounded up everybody he ever knew in science fiction, and the artists that did the covers for the books, and he got them all to write for him, and they're lavishly illustrated. It's just an amazing body of work that really should have won a Hugo and never did. But it's on e-fanzines on Earl Kemp's page there, and very, very interesting writing.
It was a fan award.
Oh yeah, sure.
Oh yeah, won that. And when I first started, I discovered e-fanzines back in 2003. That was one of the first ones I really started reading.
At Corflu Choir, Earl donated a copy of the illustrated report on pornography, and I bid on it and lost to Michael Dobson, which I turned out to be really happy about, because I got home and in my luggage there was a nice note from the TSA saying, we looked through this and didn't find anything inappropriate.
What's wrong with you?
I wonder what Dobson found in his suitcase.
Talking about Earl Kemp
Yes.
airport stories, Rob will probably remember this too, back in 2009. Was it 2009?
2010 Winchester.
Where Earl was the Corflu 50 recipient, and he set out from Kingman, Arizona to Vegas, ready to get his flight over, and what happened? Was the flight cancelled for some reason?
I do remember there was an awful lot of delay involved.
Yeah, anyway, so they said, sorry, Mr. Kemp, we're going to have to put you up in a hotel overnight and fly you tomorrow. So they sent him to this hotel, and Earl took a look at the hotel and decided he didn't like it. It wasn't up to his standards. So he turned around and walked back to the terminal, and found a row of benches or something and just sat there in the Las Vegas airport overnight at the age of 80. Flew out the next day, was the absolute life and soul of the party at the Winchester Corflu. You wouldn't have believed it possible. That's
Absolutely, yeah.
full of vitality. The man
Yeah.
was.
Because Bill, where's Bill? Interviewed him at that.
Yes,
Corflu.
right. Yeah, I think I suppose we were asked him, is all this true? And he said, well, probably. Just those amazing stories. So.
Probably also note that he was one of the founding publishers of Advent Publishers.
That's correct,
Which
back in
was,
1955.
Yeah, the first
We have some of the
first
books of the
publications to
Advent,
take
Advent,
science fiction seriously.
That's right. And man, the things that Advent published, I mean, there were a bunch of University of Chicago science fiction fans from the club there, and they started Advent, if I remember correctly. And think of the stuff that that they published over the years. All Our Yesterdays and
I Ninth Dimension.
yeah.
Yeah, Requiem for Astounding. On there. Just, very early scholarly work of anybody who's doing that in science fiction.
Did Advent ever win any awards? Because they should have for what they did.
There wasn't another media award back then.
Right. There was no non-fiction awards then, right?
Yeah, because they would have received best related work.
Yeah.
If there was a Hugo. It's a quality publications. Wheel. That's it. So, in their memory, have a drink, and we toast their memory. And because of these people, we are here celebrating. So let's move on with this. And thank you, Earl, Frank. Why do I keep thinking Murray? You're still here. Well, Bunny rhymes with Murray. That's got to be it. But Murray is quite alive, and so we're glad you're here, sir. Anyway, but for Frank, Earl, and Steve, let's celebrate their lives and keep the party going. Thank you, folks. We now have a couple-hour break before we come up to the next thing for tonight that's in here. John Purcell versus audience is what I'm calling it. I have my guitar upstairs, and I'm going to assault your sensibilities and your ears with a short little set of songs. Mr. Waldron has offered to tell a story for us as well. And if anybody else wants to play my guitar and sing like a Corflu talent show, like those old little Rascals things. Let's have a show.
It's gonna be down here?
Yeah, it'll be down in here. Okay? That'll be about 9 o'clock right down in here.
You're doing very well, John. You can do better, though.
I salute you.
I see Moffett. Well, that's what I mean.
You made it. You made it. Crazy stuff with the ground show. Crazy stuff with the ground show. You made it. Glad you're here.
I almost suggested that you ask. But one of the things that's